What is going on, everyone? This is Dr. Josh Funk, and you are listening to the Strength and Knowledge Podcast. What's up, everybody? It's Dr. Josh Funk. After 2024 CSM 3 days out, it is me and Dr. Zach Baker, a.k.a. Uncle Baker, for those of you that know him very, very well. We came back from CSM with what we'll call here at R2P a lot of juice. I think overall the vibes were very, very high. I even had a post yesterday where I noted that the one word that stuck out for me was optimism. I think that overall we have a profession that has gotten out of the doldrums of the negative Nancy narratives. I don't know how much of that was kind of just naturally compounded by everything going on with the pandemic and some things that were outside of our control, potentially also, compounding the word burnout into the mix. But overall, I think we have a profession that is trending upward. What were your overall takes, Zach?
So this was the third CSM that we had been a part of, and the first one we went to is kind of hard to gauge because it was the first time after the pandemic. It was hybrid of virtual and in-person. Last year it picked up. This year felt different, though. There was over 15,000, I think maybe over 16,000 people there. Everybody that came up and interacted with us, from students to longer tenured clinicians, extremely optimistic, extremely upbeat. This was by far the most enjoyable one that I had been to, and that's not a discredit to the previous two, but there was something about this year that just felt different.
Yeah, it was great. Honestly, for me, I almost didn't have enough energy for this year. Running a booth with you over the course of our time there, it's amazing to have the ability to interact with so many people. But I definitely found myself at the end of every day ready to go to bed. So for those of you that I didn't get to see during CSM, and that includes some of my favorites at the CalU group, where I was unable to make it to the Friday meetup, as well as our University of Maryland alumni meetup, I was exhausted. And as you can imagine, being in a lot of different places, with 15 to 16,000 different people, having a ton of events, it was very, very challenging to really put yourself in a situation where you were seeing everybody despite being in relatively close proximity. Zach, what was your biggest takeaway in terms of either conversations with students, conversations with other professionals? What's something that you are doing differently as a result of your time at CSM?
So one thing that I think is different now compared to several years ago from my lens, which is kind of more the academic educational side of things, is the awareness of postgraduate opportunities. So whether that's formal residencies or fellowships, or people just being more intentional about where they are getting their first job. I found myself answering a lot of really good questions when people came up, wanting to know more about Rehab to Perform, wanting to know more about the R2P sports residency. Students are doing their homework, and they can tell the difference between a good company and just an average company, and they know what they want. It's no longer just going to school, graduating, and finding a job. It's going to school, graduating, having a very intentional vision of what they want to accomplish, and making sure that they're getting in with an organization that meets that vision. And it's refreshing to see, because I felt like all of the conversations I had with people were genuine. I didn't feel like I was just reciting a script or going through the motions. People actually came up and sought us out with some degree of intentionality with it. And it really makes the day fly by when that happens. I look at some of the other vendors that maybe had to follow a little bit more of a script because they got a service or something that they're trying to sell. And I found myself being very thankful to realize, like, we had a lot of different people come to our booth for a variety of different reasons, and it kept things a lot more refreshing.
Agreed. I think in our situation, the central theme to our booth was really just relationship development.
Yeah.
I think that when you talk about our academy, which is why we're there, we're looking to educate and inform professionals. We have the residency arm that's there. We're trying to create awareness and drive interest. And then also in our company to people who are potentially looking for a job. We're big believers that we need to focus on the marketing funnel that parallels our ability to get in front of professionals. And if you have not yet thought of the marketing funnel that runs in parallel with your generating of new patients, generating talent for your organization comes from you driving awareness and interest. You need to drive awareness and interest before you engage and potentially convert an individual to join your team. So for us, we fortunately, really unintentionally for a while, have been doing this, and this is just another initiative of ours to develop genuine relationships over a long period of time, knowing that the best kind of working relationships are ones that didn't happen overnight. Zach, as it relates to the residency itself, I got a lot of questions about the evolution of our residency. So when you're talking about the conversations that you're having with individuals who are coming up, expressing genuine interest for what is going on with our company, the residency was one of them. What would you have to say as it relates to the evolution of the residency program?
Yeah, and I think all of my thoughts will probably be echoed by our first resident who we ever had, Samantha Corbello, because she was in there from the ground floor, went through the first year, and then has been with us following residency as we've gone through the second and third cohort. So I think she'll echo a lot of these same sentiments of just the evolution, which has largely been we've added more staff and we've added more faculty. Year one, it was honestly mostly myself, just from a quality control standpoint. We didn't know exactly what we were getting into in regards to how our plan would play out. So having one person involved with the execution of that plan from a lecturing standpoint, from a mentorship standpoint, it allowed us to be more agile and be dynamic with plans. After we got through that first year, though, we realized we can add a lot of benefit to this residency by getting other people in our ecosystem involved. So we added more faculty members from a classroom standpoint and from a mentorship standpoint. We also added a whole nother location. So now we not only operate out of our Frederick facility for patient care, we also have a resident that operates out of our Germantown location. That's been huge for getting people who are unfamiliar with the Maryland, D.C. area, because from a living standpoint, being in that Montgomery County, Germantown area, a little bit closer to D.C., that is appealing to people who are coming from outside of the area, and they're thinking of how am I going to spend my time outside of residency? And being 25, 30 minutes closer to the nation's capital gives you a lot more options from a housing, entertainment, and just kind of living standpoint. And I think the biggest thing that we've also done is we've streamlined the content, and we've gotten a better pulse on what things can be allocated as part of independent study, independent resources to just make available for people, versus what is best allocated for our individual time with the resident in the classroom and during mentorship sessions. And that evolution has been driven by previous and current residents. Them giving us feedback as they're going through the process. What do they find value in? What do they perceive as being high-ticket items that they want to experience? And what are things that they just want available to them? Obviously, all fitting within the ABPTRFE guidelines of what are the minimum things that you need to have in there from an hours allocation, from a content allocation, and then leveraging our strengths as a company with who we have from a personnel standpoint.
You mentioned the previous residents that we had. They obviously are off to doing very, very impressive things, as well as hopefully are putting us in a position where we have the most important vanity metric as it relates to residencies, a 100% pass rate. But share briefly about what our three previous sports residents are up to.
Yeah. So Sam Corbello was our first resident, and she stayed on with us at R2P upon graduation. And she has a hybrid role right now. So she's about 20 hours in the clinic at our Frederick location. The other 20 hours of her week are over at Hood College, which is a local Division III school, where she's operating as a physical therapist, doing patient care outside of their athletic training room. And that relationship really stemmed because that's where we do our sports venue coverage. It's one of the three sites, in addition to Mount St. Mary's and the Naval Academy, where our residents have the ability to accumulate hours for sports venue coverage. Our second cohort brought us Christian Huckfelt and Bami Adu. Christian was adamant about getting into the baseball world, and he ended up landing a job within the Houston Astros organization. He's down in Florida right now at their facility. And then Bami transitioned into the pro soccer world and is on the West Coast with the Seattle Sounders. Currently, we've got Seth Hawks and Abby Hammond. And admittedly, they're still pretty open in regards to where they want to go. They're not really tied into needing to go into pro sports, needing to go into collegiate sports, needing to go into an outpatient environment. They're both right in the thick of it right now, halfway through their cohort, and still trying to be in that exploratory phase of what they think is the best fit for them. Regardless of what they choose, they're going to do really well.
You talk a little bit about the diversification of the faculty in terms of bringing different people in with different strengths. It makes me think about the burnout word, and then the fact that diversification of what people do on a regular basis also can bring them with certain levels of fulfillment. Tying this into the talk that I was able to be a part of, diversification of revenue or diversification of your business. And that's something that I think that over the years we have done very, very well with regards to providing people with different pathways or different tracks. This relates to one of my big CSM takeaways as it relates to just all of the different options that people can have after graduation. We have former PT students that are in professional sports. We have certain PT students that have never worked in a formal clinic and are doing entirely fitness programming online based on social media branding. We have other ones in non-clinical roles with certain companies. We have others that have gone more formal routes with regards to clinical site directors, some in the military. What's something that you would recommend to DPT students who maybe are in a situation where they've been exposed to some of the unique offerings that our field has now as a result of being at CSM with regards to how they should approach these next few months and years as it relates to exploring the track of their choice?
I think the biggest thing they can do is figure out who are the other people that have jobs in the area that they want to be. If they're interested in college sports, find PTs that are in college sports. If you're interested in owning your own practice, find people who have gone through those steps. And I think this is where you start to make those genuine connections that you talked about earlier, where early in your career, you meet people, you network, you get your name and face in front of them, and you start that hopefully kind of lifelong and career-long relationship that may end up opening some doors to you in the future from an employment standpoint, or it may just open your eyes to areas of that career choice or field of that career that were unbeknownst to you, either positively or negatively. There's a lot of people that go into a certain setting with an idea of what it looks like, and until you actually spend time there, you don't truly know what the day-to-day looks like. So I think there's a superficial understanding, and then there's a little bit more deep understanding that if you surround yourself with the right people, ask the right questions, and seek out the right experiences, you should get a very accurate representation of what that setting or that job or responsibility looks like. And I would rather know that on the front end than on the back end after you've committed to something that may be a little bit over or underwhelming based off your expectations.
I am going to draw a parallel here with dating apps. And if you just go through a dating app and you just decide to hang out with somebody solely based on how things superficially look, don't be surprised when you show up to coffee, brunch, dinner, or whatever that you end up doing, and you're underwhelmed. Get involved with having a conversation. Yes, you're going to have to reach out to somebody that you don't know, and you're probably going to have to ask them more direct questions. But at the end of the day, I'm sure you're not the first person to ask that question, and you are going to avoid wasting the time of both parties, and especially putting yourself in a situation where you have a much more clear-cut idea of what things would be like in that environment. Instead of carving time out, acting very, very interested, and then you put yourself in a contractual relationship with an organization, and you run into a situation where things don't quite go the way that either one of you wanted to. Be direct, know what matters to you, know what your non-negotiables are, and ideally you're getting as close to your ideal situation as possible as you go throughout your journey. Zach, any thoughts there? I know you've been with your high school sweetheart, and dating apps haven't necessarily been a thing there. But
I was going to say, I have never, for clarity, have never used a dating app. I don't even think I could navigate one if I tried anyways. Barely turn my phone on. But I think back of like the people I spent the most time talking to at CSM this weekend were honestly people that like 3, 4, 5 years ago, I had just reached out on a whim to either introduce myself or ask them a question. Now that I'm in the residency space, I think about the different program directors that I interacted with this weekend, that the first time I ever talked to them was like 5 or 6 years ago when I had the idea of starting the residency, and it was like, how do I even go about doing this? And just reached out to other individuals, picked their brain on if it was worthwhile, what the appropriate steps were. People who were speaking at CSM that I went out of the way just to shake their hand, introduce myself, tell them that I liked what they said and that I've been following along. Those are people that on social media, try to comment on their stuff. I try to reach out and say, hey, I appreciate what you're doing. Your content resonates with me. And it's usually just those little informal interactions that develop into something relatively meaningful along the way. So, don't downplay that stuff, but I'll also have the caveat of saying, like, be intentional with it and be genuine with it. Don't just blast out 100 messages to people and forget who you talked to and forget what you said to them. But I do think a lot of those interactions are ones that some of my former students and people that I've interacted with, that's how our relationships got started. And some other people in the field that I look up to and try to emulate how I do my role, that's how my interactions got started with them.
Reminds me a little bit of my guy, Ben Lee. Potentially Arthur from Russell Sage as well. I'm just thinking about some of the students of whom I've interacted with for 2-3 years at this point. And you're right. In the beginning, it was very like superficial, basic, question asking, back and forth. And now there's a genuine relationship there where unfortunately, Ben Lee is a Michigan fan, so I try not to hold that against him, especially after they've beaten my Buckeyes over the past 3 years. And then Arthur just reached out to me to add value to the graduation ceremonies at Russell Sage. But you never know where kind of that mentee-mentor relationship goes. You're going to have things naturally that are more formal through organizations such as our group that I mentioned earlier at Cal U. You've got teammates through the AASPT. But how can you take something that's a little bit more formal and get what you need out of it a little bit more? I think the challenge that I always have when people ask me who my mentor is that mentors serve in different roles and can be valuable to us at different stages of the journey. So I am always a big believer that you probably need to have multiple mentors and for different possible things that you are looking to accomplish. Your mentor might have shortcomings. I am sitting here saying that I have certain shortcomings, and I could easily say at this point, if you reached out to me for certain topics, I'd be like, hey, I'm probably not the best possible person. So sometimes asking of this individual of whom you're trying to create a relationship with, what they feel like their strong points are and how they've been able to get to that point where they're at, as opposed to taking everything in that you may or may not see, of which they might not be very strong at. Zach is over here nodding his head. There are certain things he is very strong with and others of which he is not strong with. So if you were to just take him as your only mentor, you might be in a situation of which you run into some challenges from a professional development standpoint. Zach, any thoughts there?
Yeah, two different ways with that, and it kind of goes on the topic of like how the residency has evolved. Once we got a good grasp of what we were trying to do with the residency, and admittedly what we're trying to do within the company, I tend to be the person who's often like testing out the waters for the company, and we get kind of a pulse of what we need, and then we figure out like who do we have in our ecosystem that can best serve that need. And I think our residency and our company as a whole, you think about some of these positions we've created in the company, they were things that you used to previously do, I used to previously do. Other people that have moved on to other roles within the company, they used to perform them as part of their daily tasks, kind of get the processes and procedures in place then we tagged out to other people where that's either their passion or that's their niche or that's their expertise. So I do think that's really what came first to mind when I heard you talking about that. My other real big takeaway from CSM is don't forget there's 16,000 people there. You would be surprised who you get to interact with, and it often catches you by surprise how you meet them or what their actual role is. I think about being at different business meetings or just eating breakfast at the hotel in the morning, and you're sitting next to somebody, you make small talk, you shake their hand, you introduce, and then you go find out that's the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, or this person's getting their PhD in my passion project, and they're now somebody that I can reach out to for discussion there, or this person has a connection of somebody that I'm trying to get a job with, of a former student. And it's kind of funny. You make all these random connections where if you would have just never looked to your side, asked them how their day was doing, shaken their hand, you would have never made that connection. The other thing I will say is be mindful. You never know who the person is you're sitting next to, so be on your best behavior. I've had numerous people that were either maybe prospective hires or students where you see them interacting in a group of people where you're like, I don't know if that's who I want representing our company or representing our organization. So just keep in mind, you never know who you'll meet. You never know what eyes are on you. And when you're in a professional environment like that or a professional conference, just make sure you know what your outcome is that you're going there. If you're going there for networking purposes, make sure you leave with networking outcomes. If you go there with business prospects, make sure you leave with business prospects. If you go there from an educational standpoint, you want to attend the clinical sessions, make sure that you're going in there and taking something back with you. So CSM, people are there for different reasons, a lot of great different reasons and variety of why you could be there. It is easy to be overwhelmed. Make sure you go in with a game plan and you leave with something actionable.
A little thing to leave with before we wrap this up, but just to piggyback on what Zach was just talking about, myself being in a situation where I am in charge of a healthcare organization that is largely insurance focused with some self-pay, largely in person, I found inspiration and extreme benefit in conversations with people like the founder of Anchor, the founder of Secondor Health, and sorry, Anchor is a cable machine. Secondor Health is a tech company, as well as the founders or co-founders of Rehab Guys and Movement X, all of which are not similar to Rehab to Perform, but all are doing certain things extremely well, of which I can ideally draw upon my own conclusions as to what they're doing well and how that could potentially benefit us. So make sure that you are also looking beyond the short term, which is directly in your face, and trying to pull inspiration and especially the word innovation into whatever it is that you're doing from other people. With that being said, appreciate you all staying tuned into this episode of the Strength and Knowledge Podcast. I enjoyed getting on back here with Zach, but Zach is doing a tremendous job of bringing in some of the industry's best and our sports residents and other individuals that we feel like would be a tremendous guest for you all. If you have any suggestions, don't hesitate to reach out. And as always, hit the follow button. Thank you for listening to the Strength and Knowledge Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode or have been tuned in for multiple episodes, we would love for you to subscribe, rate, and give us a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Until next time, thanks for listening.